Well, good morning. Welcome to Debbie's Back Porch. So glad to have you with us. This is the next in my series of baking with puff pastry. This is a 7-layer puff pastry breakfast pie. It's so good. And you can make 6 layers or 8 or 3. Here is one possible list of ingredients, and you can make your own. You can pause and write these down. And hey, while you're paused, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. And if you click the little bell, then you'll get a notice when I post the next in this series of baking with puff pastry. Now let's get cooking. So here are the ingredients I used. That's 12 slices of bacon, and it's been about halfway cooked. You need to cook it off a little to get the oil out. That's some slices of cheddar cheese. That's some freshly grated Parmesan, some chopped peppers, some onions. I had intended to use some canned mushrooms, but I was out. So we also need eggs, 6 or 7. I listed 6, but we're also going to do an egg wash, so you may add another one or just use a little of the 6. So this is my puff pastry that you may have seen me make. I'll link the video on how to make this. This is the quick puff pastry, not the classic. And you know, even the quick puff pastry is not really quick, but it's quicker than the classic. So this is how you have it. It's about 1.5 pounds, and I want to use about 1 pound of it, but I'm not going to cut that pound evenly because I'm going to use a 9-inch cast iron skillet for this pie. And so I need considerably more in the bottom layer than the top. So I'm just going to kind of guesstimate it here. And when you're cutting puff pastry that you've made like this, you want to cut it across the fold. And you want to cut it straight down. You don't want to use a sawing motion. And it's been in the refrigerator, so it's kind of hard. So just give it a little gentle pressure, pushing straight down. And you see this piece over on the left is going to be my top crust, which will be much smaller than the bottom one. And what I'll have left is enough to make peach turnovers. And we're just going to put this back in the refrigerator because I'm going to use it tomorrow. You would put it in the freezer if it were going to be longer than that. So I'll start with the bottom crust. The pan is 9 inches across and about 1.5 inches deep. So 9, 10, 11 and a half. Probably want to try to roll this out to 12 inches. And if you have grocery store puff pastry, that's a little bit easier because it comes in a little bit wider shape than I have this here. But that's okay. Just takes a little bit more rolling to do this. And you know, this puff pastry is so good. So I'm going to roll in one direction. And I won't show you this whole process, but just to give you an idea how you want to handle it. It's still very cold, so I'm softening it up by rolling it slowly. And I have a little flour. And you know, I have this Silpat rolling sheet on top of a glass cutting board. And so it moves a little bit. I got to figure out how to stop that. And probably I should just wet the glass cutting board. Anyway, you roll. You try to roll in one direction only. So what you do is you turn the crust instead of turning your rolling pin. And flour as you need to. Turn it many times. You don't want it to stick. And when I get this rolled out big enough, I'll come back to you. So I'm almost there, and I want to show you this last little bit. Started with a rectangle, and I want a circle. And so there's a little finessing you might want to do. If you can see, it's close to big enough, but I've got some spots there. So I'll turn this dough around and around and work on getting it into a shape closer to what I want. And this is pretty pliable dough once it warms up just a little bit. But you do want to work fairly quickly because this dough is just full of butter. And it it will eventually start to get kind of sticky. So here is my 9-inch pan, and I'm just going to place this in carefully. Now with a pie crust, remember, never stretch it. Place it wherever you need it and then push it toward the inside. And if you find you have some spots that don't quite go to the top, that's okay. We'll cut off extra and stick it in that spot, because this is pretty pliable and easily repairable. And you see I'm pushing it down in so that there's no pulling, no stretching, no pressure on it to pull it away from the pan. And I'm pressing it up against the sides to kind of seal it. And you'll see I've got a little bit extra here and a little gap over to the right. So I'm going to cut a little piece off and fit it in. Now, let me just say a word about puff pastry when you're making a pie like this. It will puff, but it won't puff as much as it would if you were making something that didn't put a lot of weight on the pie, on the crust. So we'll just fill that gap there, and I have another little gap over here. It comes up to the top, but I actually need it to go over just a little bit so that I can crimp it together with the top crust. But you just fix it however you can. If it tears, which I doubt it will, because it's pretty sturdy, or at least this is pretty sturdy. I've never used the refrigerated or frozen puff pastry from the grocery store, so I can't speak for how it will work. But this is pretty sturdy, and I doubt it will tear. And unless you freeze it, it's not going to break. But, you know, if you froze it, it might. So just fix it. And then I push it down around the edges. And then I'm going to egg wash the inside of it. I'm using the egg wash to repair that little spot there to make sure that the patch I made sticks. And we'll just egg wash this inside to help keep it crispy. Now, full disclosure, you should probably poke some little holes with a fork all through this, and I forgot to, but as it turns out, it didn't matter. But you really should just poke, I don't know, 5-6 times with a fork. Otherwise, it's possible for it to rise up in the bottom and push your ingredients aside, and then you'd have a big gap underneath it. So as my mother used to say to me when I was a little girl, do as I say, not as I do. As it turned out, this was okay, but you do want to poke some holes. So now, as you can see, I have cut my bacon strips in half, and you can arrange this any way you want to. I mostly like to put it in the direction that the slices will be. Now, you know I said at the beginning you can use anything in this pie you want. You could use some sausage. You would want to cook it ahead and drain it. You could use thinly sliced ham, or you could use any 2 or any 3 or whatever you want to put in here. I like bacon. Then I have some freshly grated Parmesan cheese, and I'm going to sprinkle a thin layer over this. And you know, because I don't have the mushrooms to make it 7 layers, I'm going to split my cheese into 2. Then these are some sliced green onions, chopped up. You can use regular onions. This cooks for 35 to 40 minutes, so they'll have plenty of time to cook. And then I'm going to add some cheese slices, just because I had some cheese slices, cheddar cheese slices. I got these for sandwiches for the 4-year-old, and because I don't usually buy it in slices. And then I have a little bit of chopped pepper here. I had a yellow pepper that I wanted to use up. You can use any that you want to. And then here is some more of my Parmesan. And then I'm going to mix the eggs. So I'm adding 6 more eggs here, in addition to the one I'm using for the egg wash. And you can add more eggs or less depending on the size of your family and how eggy you want it. I think I only listed 6 total in the ingredients, but that's flexible. And I'm going to spread it out just a little bit because I want it to go down through all the ingredients down to the bacon so that it's like a quiche. Only, it's really not exactly like a quiche. First, because we have a top crust and because it's not the same texture. And I'm putting a little freshly ground black pepper on this. And I'm going to add a little salt. And now to the next crust. So the process here is the same as the one on the bottom, except I have less dough. And I only need to go about 9.5 inches. So when I have this rolled out, I'll be right back. So here we go. I'll pull this back over, and you do want to work kind of quickly. As I said, the crust can start to get just a little bit gummy. And I'm going to place this on here. Again, no stretching. Just want to kind of line it up. And with this pan, it's hard to make your regular scallop. And you don't have to use a cast iron pan. You can use just any 9-inch deep dish pie crust or pie pan. I've just gotten into the habit over the years of using cast iron for most everything. So you'll see I cut this. I cut the 2 crust to the same size, and I'm folding it over to make a thick edge to use in making a scallop. And you can do it any way you want to, but you want to do something to seal the edge. And I do the little 2-finger pinch, just like I do in a regular pie plate, but it's a little bit harder in the cast iron. But it always works. You can also, go around it with a fork or whatever kind of scalloped edge you like to make. Entirely up to you. And we're going to egg wash this pretty generously. I do have my oven preheated to 400 degrees. And I'll bake it for about 35 to 40 minutes. And it'll get nice and brown and crunchy. And I didn't forget the holes this time. You want to poke some little holes in it just to allow the steam to escape. Because you've got some raw ingredients in there and they're going to steam a little bit. And I'm going to set this pan on a cookie sheet because it might cook over a little bit depending on what you put in it. This one's not totally up to the top. But yours might be. So put it on a pan. I'll be back. And here you go. This is what you have. Now I'm going to set this pan on a wire rack to let it cool so there's plenty of airflow under it to cool it off. About 15 minutes because right now it's so hot. Then I'll slice a piece and be right back. And this is what you have. Look at all that yummy cheese. Let me show you this crust. See how the flakes come right off. There you go. And now when you bake it into a pie like this, the puff pastry in the middle doesn't puff up huge, but you can see how flaky and crisp it is there. Now you don't have to use puff pastry for crust on this. You can use your regular pie crust, but the puff pastry just adds a little touch. So let me dig in. And the crust is crispy and the eggs are fluffy and the cheese is yummy and the whole thing is just great. Even the 4-year-old liked it. Now I call this a breakfast pie, but you could have it for any meal. It'd be a great Sunday brunch, be a great weeknight dinner. I hope you try this and I hope you like it, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.